start off with a little introduction and a reading for us, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. The latest book that I have out, it's called Death and the Brewery Queen, and it's set in Masham in the North Riding of Yorkshire in 1930. And this is the cover. Some of you may have seen it already.
Go that way.
I'll get the hang of this, right, or I won't get the hang of it, whichever. But that's the book cover, and we're in the brewery, the Barleycorn Brewery, and we're with George Parnaby, and George is the brother of Ruth, who is the brewery queen, and their father is the head cooper at the brewery. Now, coopers were part of an ancient craft. The Society of Coopers was founded in the 14th century, and George has served his apprenticeship, so he's made casks and barrels, and today's the final day of George's apprenticeship. And to join the Society of Coopers, you not only have to be able to create a barrel or a cask perfectly, you must also go through something called a trussing. And this is the day of George's trussing. And he's quite anxious about it because he doesn't know what to expect. So here's George waiting in the wood stores. George Parnaby waited in the wood stores among the casks of new cask staves that he'd brought down yesterday from the drying loft. He breathed in the familiar smell of the wood that had come all the way from Quebec. Wood never hurt anyone. Wood had no temper. Wood had no vicious streak. The trussing wouldn't last long. The other coopers, Tim and old Barney, they'd see to that. They would make sure George came out in one piece. They had cleared a space in the cooperage, pushing trestles and sawhorses against the far wall. George heard the voices as people arrived. Why did they come? It was no one's business that his that this initiation had to happen. They were laughing and talking, waiting for the show to begin. I'm not a show, George said to himself. I'm not a circus animal. He wanted to yell at them. Go away, the lot of you. He closed his eyes. Old Barney had said, it's nothing. Everyone goes through it. You'll be back and wonder what all the fuss was about. George pressed his hand on his chest to slow his heart. He ran his tongue round dry lips. Looking at himself in the cracked mirror, he smoothed his hair. He admired his shirt, ironed by his sister Ruth the night before. This is your big day, she whispered. I have my start as brewery queen, now you'll have yours, our new beginning. This morning, when George put on his clean shirt, the old man sneered. You're not off to a wedding. And then he laughed, his nasty laugh, which was the only laugh he had. As George waited, something was happening in his head, a thumping at the front of his skull. He listened to people coming into the workshop. He made himself look through the crack in the door. The audience made a horseshoe shape at the far end of the room. So many of them, too many. He should have tried harder to find out what was going to happen at this trussing. Suddenly, the audience cheered. Why? So that's from the second chapter of the book. And George's old man, his dad, is someone that he would very much like to get away from.
Are trussings a real thing? Did they really happen?
Oh, absolutely a real thing. And they were going on, as far as they were going on up to the 1960s. And if anyone has got YouTube and would like to see, well, obviously some people have, lots of people have, see what was going on, you can probably, Google a trussing and see what it was that actually took place. It's an initiation ceremony. I think quite a few trades had initiation ceremonies.
So your brewery's fictional, but it's based on There's quite a lot of real breweries up in Yorkshire, isn't there?
Yes, and when yeah, there is, and there are two in Masson. There's Theakston's and there's Black Sheep, and there are, as you say, there are lots all over Yorkshire. And I did go round some of the breweries. I went round Theakston's, I went round Black Sheep, and I went round the Ossett Brewery as well. I had some help with my research from the chairman of Ossett Brewery. And I also talked to people at Tetley's, which of course isn't there anymore now, but I did a heritage tour, and some of the staff who had worked at Tetley's were there and were really helpful, and told me all sorts of things about brewing and breweries and so on. And I wouldn't have been able to write it authentically without that help.
We've already got some nice comments on the screen. Maureen Neathway says it was so lovely to hear you read from the book. She's about halfway through now and loving it.
All right, thank you, Maureen. I'm glad you could make it.
She's slightly further ahead of me in the book as well, but I'm really enjoying it so far as well. And we had loads of questions before we went live. Pat,
we did, didn't we? Yeah. I know that there was one from Pat Adams Wright. When did it cross your mind to write a book, and what prompted the thought?
Yeah.
Well, my first published book, it was because of my mother. My mother was a very good letter writer, and it turned out that she'd always wanted to be a writer. And when she was young, and she lived in the Lloyd's Arms in Leeds, and various people used to go in there, including reporters and journalists, and she asked one of them how she would go about writing a book. And they said, oh, you'd need a typewriter. Well, that just put it totally beyond her means that she would need a typewriter. And she started to do other things, but she really was always a writer. And wherever I was, she would send me ideas about things I might like to write and suggestions. And none of them quite fitted for what I was writing at the time. And a friend said, why don't you get your mother a book and ask her to write her own story? And I did. And when she gave me a story, it was it was fascinating. She'd been orphaned at a young age. Her mother was Irish Catholic, her father was a German Jew. And she had a really quite tragic early life and gone to live with her uncle and her cousins at the Lloyd's Arms. And she'd lived on a street called Bread Street off York Road, which is about where there's a primary school there now, Eber Gardens Primary School, I think it's called. And so I spent a really long time writing this book. And I called it Sisters on Bread Street, because of that being the street she lived on. And I was so slow writing it that by the time I had got it to something like finished, she didn't have all that long to live. And I previously had 2 unpublished novels, and each of them took 2 years to be turned down by a couple of publishers. It was in the days before I knew about agents, and they sent me really nice letters, but they just didn't take them on. And so I thought, well, I can't wait 2 years for somebody to look at a book. So I brought this out myself. And then and fortunately, mum did see it, she did read it, and she was absolutely delighted about it. And then I sent it to an agent, the agent I'm with now, and she placed it for me. But oddly enough, it had to come out under a different name because it had already been published, even though it had only been published by me with the help of Peepaltree Press. And so I came up with another title, and it came out as my very first historical novel. And it won an award. It won the HarperCollins Elizabeth Elgin Award. And so it came out under my own name. as Somewhere Behind the Morning. And it's basically the same story, but it's longer and it has sort of little differences to the original book. And the title, I took it from an essay by J.B. Priestley. He said, "I have always been delighted at the prospect of a new day, a fresh try, one more start, with perhaps a bit of magic waiting somewhere behind the morning." So that was its second title. And then eventually I was out of contract with that publisher. And so my present publisher brought it out again, and I reclaimed the title. So it's now once more Sisters on Bread Street, but by Frances Brody rather than Frances McNeill. So I hope that answers the question of when did it cross my mind to write a book.
I also wanted to know if you were a planner.
Oh, right. Yeah, I saw that. And it kind of made me think, because in some ways I would love to be a planner. And of course I am to some extent a planner. But I think the reason I don't plan right from the very beginning, planning carefully through and through and through, is because I think writing a novel for me takes some gestation time. And if something is still kind of percolating and new ideas are going to come in, and to plan too early might not leave room for those ideas. So it's a combination of writing something, planning a little bit, writing a bit more, and a combination.
Well, there's a really good question coming on the stream from someone called Lynn Strutt.
Oh, yeah.
It says, do you research your time period extensively? How can you be sure of little details? E.g., you talked about someone ironing a shirt. Would there have been electric irons, or would it have been a flat iron?
Oh, it would have been it would have been a flat iron, wouldn't it? Yes, it would have been a flat iron. Yeah. So it would have been quite a dashing away with a smoothing iron kind of time, wouldn't it?
You do a lot of research on the time period, though, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I tried to look at newspapers, see what was going on. And I also look at a perpetual calendar. So I know what day of the week, say, Christmas fell on, or what day Easter fell on. So I know what day of the week it might be in my story. And I find that really useful, because there was a time when I was writing the first of the series, Dying in the Wool, and there was a point at which I got very stuck, and that's set with the background of a woolen mill, and there was also the dyeing industry was involved, and so I looked to see what was happening on that day in real life, the day that I'd reached in my story. And not far from where I lived then in Bradford, there was an explosion at Low Moor munitions factory. And it was on the very day when something crucial was happening in my story. And it just fitted in perfectly. It was one of those serendipity things that you might not expect. So that can help, that kind of feeling for what was happening at the time.
Now, Maureen asked a question off the stream, and I know you were talking about an exhibition you saw. She said, how did you come up with the brilliant idea of linking a brewery to a beauty queen? It's a grand idea.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Well, I think what happens, and I think this isn't just in novel writing, I think it's in all sorts of things. You get two separate ideas that come together and something else comes out of them. And I find that happens quite a lot. And the brewery queen, there wasn't ever in real life a brewery queen, but there were queens of industry. And I went to an exhibition at the Leeds Industrial Museum, and that was the Queens of Industry exhibition. And here's a picture, see if I can put this up properly this time so you can see it. Oh dear, sorry about this.
Oh, go back a bit.
Oh, wait a minute, look, I'm nearly there, but I'm going the wrong way. Story of my life going the wrong way. Queens of Industry. This is Marjorie Knowles. She was the cotton queen. And the very first queens were in the railway industry to celebrate 100 years of the railways. And then there was a coal queen. And a friend of mine who'd been in Durham in the 70s at university went to her first miners' gala. And she said, at this first miners' gala, the only woman in her own right on the podium was the coal queen, until she was joined by Shirley Williams as the MP. So that was where the idea came from. And because there'd never been a brewery queen, I thought, oh, a brewery, because my mum had worked in a brewery for a while, and not for very long. And I'd been in Massam, I'd been doing an event in the town hall there. This was some years before with Stephen Booth. So I'd been in the brewery then and just had a look in the reception area and had a look at what they were doing. And so that was how it came about that I decided on a brewery queen, because I didn't want to use a queen where there had already been one. And those queens of industry, they were conventionally attractive young women, but they also had character and they had personality and they could represent their industry and they were very smart. And so for working class girls, it was a real opportunity that very often changed lives. And it was John McGoldrick that curated the exhibition. And I'm very glad he did, because it was well worth seeing.
It's a good museum. Do you often visit to get like inspiration?
Well, I did go when I was looking to choose Kate's car. I went to Bradford Industrial Museum because they have a lot of Jowett's there. So I was able to go there and pick out her car, the one that I thought she would have, which was a 1913 Jowett. And then I was very fortunate in coming across Noel Stokoe, who knows everything there is to know about Jowett cars and has published several books on them. So he has been very helpful. He was really pleased when I decided that Kate would drive a Jowett. And they were made in Bradford. They were made at 4 Lane Ends in Bradford. And I think they were wonderful cars, but the business, I think, was undercapitalised. So eventually things started to go wrong, which was a great shame. I mean, wouldn't it have been wonderful to have a car manufacturers in Bradford still? Especially if they had electric cars these days.
A lot of the big industries that you sort of write about in the Kate Shackleton series,
Yeah.
are very uniquely of this region but don't exist anymore.
Yes, I know. And I think there is a little bit, I don't think I actually set out to kind of to do that, but I was very conscious even when I was writing the historical novels, that I was talking to people whose work had just changed completely, like shoe repairers who were members of the St. Crispin's organisation, or even butchers, like my granddad worked in the meat market. So I did talk to our family butcher from the time and to various people, and they're very pleased to be able to tell you about what it was like and how they learned their crafts. So in a way, I've sort of tried to find some of that and hold on to it. You'd think really I wasn't writing crime novels from the way I talk, but they are crime novels. I sneak the crimes in.
They're great crime novels. Paula Williams wanted to know, she says she loves Kate Shackleton. She's not the only one. She's a brilliant character. She'd love to know how you came up with the idea for her.
Right. Kate didn't arrive first. In Dying in the Wall, there was someone missing. There was a missing person. And I sort of see them in my mind's eye. And I thought, well, who is it and who might solve it? And I need a detective. And so Kate kind of came along. Oh, I know. I've just remembered actually what I did. I probably said this before, but we have family albums, and I was looking through an old family album, and I saw someone in there who was a perfect 1920s person. And she was someone I didn't know a lot about. She was a friend of the family. And because I didn't know much about her, I could actually create a character from that glimpse of her. And so I knew she would have been involved in the First World War, and that her husband hasn't come back yet and may not come back. And I also knew, because I'd written stories about working class Leeds, where none of my characters, none of my people had any money, they were all broke, and if they wanted to go anywhere, they'd have to sort of find the money, and it was always a worry. And I thought, well, if a detective has to go off investigating, she needs to be able to go off somewhere at a moment's notice. So she needs an independent income. So I provided her with an independent income and a house and a car and a housekeeper. And so I kind of set her up for the job. And then her father was a high-ranking officer in police HQ in Wakefield, and he said, look, you're going to need help, you're going to need a chap with you, because there were certain places, lots of places still in the 1920s, women couldn't go alone. So that was how she came to have her sidekick and her housekeeper. And so that's how it began. And then I just knew what sort of characteristics she would need for the job, and she just had all of them. You know, she's very bright, and because it's before we have all sorts of DNA and pathology, I mean, there was quite a lot of that around, more than we would actually think, but it's really psychology rather than pathology. So she's able to, she fits in, because I also, her mother is has aristocratic connection. She married down for love. And I don't know how deliberate that was at the time, but it does mean that she can move around and talk to different people. She can fit in, and that's very helpful for an investigator. Oh, and her name, I'll just say about her name. I spent a long time coming up with her name. I sat talking with a friend about it, and she gave me a book of baby names that I still have and I still consult. And so Kate Shackleton was arrived at just by seeing what would be the best name.
My dad says, why Headingley?
Oh, right, because before the war, husband Gerald, he worked at Leeds Infirmary, he was a surgeon. And so I thought they're going to live somewhere within walking distance for Gerald to get to work. So I went up to Headingley and I walked about a lot, and I looked for suitable houses. I looked for the kind of house I thought she would like. And I eliminated quite a lot. And then there was this one particular house with wood behind it. And I thought, this is nice. I like this. This would do. And I went and walked around the wood. And there were some leaves there, like in the shape of a bat's wing. And I just thought, yeah, this is the house for her. And I did meet the owner, who was walking about the wood as well. And I said, my character is going to come and live in your house. And I thought she'd invite me in, but I think she just thought I was a bit of a nutcase. So she never invited me in. And afterwards, I was really quite glad, because that meant I could have the house just as Kate would have had it. And then afterwards, the owner of the house said to me, don't tell anyone where this house is. So I've kept the secret.
Are you ever tempted to have, so there's quite successful sort of photo books of like Peter May's Hebrides and Anne Cleeves' Shetland. Are you ever tempted to do a Frances Brody's Yorkshire?
Oh, what a picture book. You mean
Yeah.
photo? collection of photographs.
Yeah, with like photos of all the locations that you've used.
Oh, I think that's a lovely idea. I would need somebody who could take a good photograph, wouldn't I, to work with me on that? Because I don't think it would be me. But yeah, I think that's a lovely idea. Yeah. There's someone who has a book blog, a book review blog called, what does she call it? The Trail, Book Trail. And she reviews books and gives little maps and walks about, where to go around the area. And I think something like that and a book of pictures would be lovely. Yeah, good idea.
Well, we're on the visual aspect. Can we talk about your book covers, because they're amazing?
Oh yeah, well, I've been really fortunate because I think they do jump out at people, and so right from the beginning they've had this unity, and Kate has always featured on the cover, so a real draw, I think. And I don't know if you've noticed, but and then I'll just say the design. Sometimes I'm asked for a key moment or an idea or something like that, and so sometimes that happens. And then in-house at the publishers, they come up with a rough sort of design, and then it goes to the illustrator, and she comes up with the actual cover and what it's going to look like, and then it comes to me again, and it goes to everyone at the publishers, and then there's a kind of chat about any little things that might want changing. And I had mentioned that I would like Shire horses in the cover, and that I would like kind of a cobbled yard that would be like a proper brewery. And Kate does look a little bit different in this. And I don't know if you've noticed, I don't know if people have noticed this, but there's been quite a subtle change in the script of the book is now block. Oh, and they don't all have this F on. This is to tell me that this is my book that I read from. And it's now a block script and a little bit bolder in some ways. But I'll show you the American cover. I can see it some here. Oh yeah, they've kept the previous script. They preferred the old version. They preferred that script. So there's been that subtle change of script. I'll turn that light off. And then it gets really dark. So there's been that change, and also you've probably just noticed this is the first time the American publisher has come up with a different title. So not Death in the Brewery Queen, but Murder is in the Air.
And obviously spend some time, whoever designs your covers, researching the area, because they are.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sometimes I send them an actual picture of something. For instance, with the body on the train, Ardsley Junction featured quite importantly in that, and I don't know whether I actually sent a picture of Ardsley Junction. I might have done, but there's these winding train lines, and so I do sometimes do that. I'll send a picture if it seems appropriate, or a lot of the places I use they can easily be looked up. So I do give as much information as is needed. I can't rattle on too much, but I give as much information as I think might be helpful.
There's some other lovely comments coming up on the stream. Someone has said, Sandy James said she read the book set in Whitby. She loved it as the author and now she needs to visit Sands End too. My dad said he remembers the Shire horses at Tetley's Brewery in Hunslet.
Oh, really? Yeah. Fabulous. Yeah. They were such a feature of the city, weren't they? I mean, they were such a well-known site.
And Samantha wants to know if you would ever skip forward in time and write a book using Kate's descendants as characters.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, she does have Harriet, doesn't she? She does have her niece Harriet, who is very, very keen to be involved. It's a very good question. It's not sort of come into my mind yet, but we'll see.
I'm quite a fan of spin-off novellas from a series as well that tell you more about like the side characters.
Yes,
Would
yeah.
you be tempted to write a like Mrs. Sugden kind of side novella or a Sykes side novella?
I'm always tempted to do things like that, but it's just, I mean, who knows? Yeah, because I get quite involved with all the characters, but I've been doing a book a year, and that's been enough for me. There was one when the German publishers brought the books out. They asked me for a prequel. It's Kate, but I did do a prequel, and it was Kate before she started investigating. So I set that in 1921, and it was about 20,000 words long, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I would like to do little spin-offs, but I'll just have to see how it goes, and also whether the publisher would want them.
Sam also asked further up the screen how you keep your books fresh when you've written so many.
Oh, I think it's because I go out and start again. You know, I go to a new place. People have been really helpful. You know, I talk to people about backgrounds and the work they've done and so on. And sometimes what happens is one book hasn't happened very often. But when I did, I think this is one of the books you write. So I can just remember which one it was. Oh, A Death in the Dales. When I did that, A Death in the Dales, I found out then about the total eclipse of the sun that could be seen from Giggleswick School in 1927, where the Astronomer Royal set up his telescopes, and it was huge in the papers, a huge thing. And so I was tempted, a little bit tempted, to bring it into A Death in the Dales, and I thought, no, this is too much. You know, it needs its own space. And I'd also wanted to write something about a really popular performer, you know, someone in the style of Grace Fields or I'm trying to think of you know, just somebody that the public really takes to their heart, Vera Lynn and Victoria Wood, you know, that kind of really popular character. So I kind of combine those two things of having a variety star who's performing at the City Varieties, and she's been invited to Giggleswick School to see the eclipse, and Kate goes along with her. So I think it's that. It's coming up with a bit of a new idea or a new take on something. And again, it's just that mixing of the two different things that might come together and bring up something new.
Do you have an end in sight for the Kate series?
Sorry?
Do you have an end in sight for the Kate series? Do you have like a planned ending? Do you know where it'll end?
I see. Oh no, no, I don't think that far ahead. I sort of, I mean, now that I've reached 1930, it's really, it's a bit of a turning point in a way. I mean, 1929 was a hard year. All those years were hard times for working people. And so I am just thinking ahead during the 30s and maybe up to 1939. But no, I've not got a definite point of where it might end. You know, where I might go to.
Someone asked if you were tempted to write more of your family sagas.
I think there's always a little bit of an element of that in the writing that I do, but I feel now that I actually have moved into crime and that I'm going to stay with that for the foreseeable future. But it's something that I think it's not always predictable, because you never know. I might wake up one morning and there'll have been something complete change. I don't know, but for now, I'm staying with crime novels.
Maureen is quite into the idea of a novella about Sykes or Mrs. Sugden.
Oh, okay. I'll bet fine, Maureen.
There's two of us now.
Okay. Right.
My dad is telling us, I know this is my dad, even though it says YouTube user. It says my grandmother in the 1930s bought gunpowder from the chemists and she used it to clean the chimneys.
Oh, well, that's something I haven't heard of. To clean the chimneys. Did she do that by mistake or was it genuine? I mean, was it, was that meant to be something to clean the chimneys with?
I think it was a genuine thing, yeah.
Yeah, you just put gunpowder. It's a bit risky, isn't it?
Yeah, you would have thought so.
I suppose they must have known exactly what to do, exactly how much gunpowder to use, and where to light the blue fuse and jump out the way, be ready to run.
So your characters, like Kate and Harriet and Sykes and Mrs. We love them and they're so fleshed out and real. Do you keep like a sort of a file of all those characters so that you keep all their details correct across all of the novel?
No, I wish I had. I wish I had done that. No, I just have to. I just have to try and remember. But I did notice when I look back at the first book, Dying in the Wool, Mrs. Sugden was calling Kate Madam. Well, she doesn't call her Madam now. It's a much more equal relationship, as it is with Sykes, a much more equal relationship now. And so, because that surprised me, in a way, it might be a good thing that I don't keep too much about what the characters were like, because over the years, I mean, the book started in 1922 and I'm in 1930, and we all change over 8 years. So, and Harriet has grown up. So, no, but in some ways it would be a good idea. It's a bit like soap operas, isn't it? Keeping a Bible.
Do you have a favourite one of your own novels?
I think because it was my mum's, it has to be Sisters on Bread Street, or as it is also known, Somewhere Behind the Morning. Yeah, I think it probably has to be that.
Do we ever, this is and you can refuse to answer this because it might give a spoiler. Do we ever find out what happens to Gerald?
Oh, well, I haven't found out yet. So there is, in one of the books, there is someone who says that they saw him and they have something that belongs to him. I won't say any more than that just now.
Samantha's asking one of her favourite author chat questions on the stream. She says, do you have a favourite character relationship that you've created?
A favourite character?
A favourite character relationship that you've created?
Relationship?
Yeah.
Do you mean between two characters? Yeah. Yeah, I think it's got to be Kate and Mrs. Sugden, or Kate and Sykes, because I like the way they spark off each other. I like their different personalities, and I like the way in which one of them might take one point of view and you can almost bet that the other one is going to be thinking something else. So, yeah.
They're quite respectful of each other's views, even when they don't agree, though.
They are, aren't they? Which is, I think, what we all should be.
I think the one I read, I'm reading Death of a Brewery Queen at the moment, but before that I was trying to read in order, and I read one and they had very differing point of views. They were trying to solve a cold case, but they were extremely respectful of each other's views.
Yes, yeah.
Kind of worked really well for them. That sort of opposing ideas helped them to sort of work out what happened.
Yeah, I think that can happen in life as well, can't it? If you're talking to someone, you've got very different ideas. You might find something else. I think there should probably be a lot more of that in life, that we listen to each other, talk to each other, because often you're not going to change somebody's point of view. But you might shift slightly, or they might shift slightly, and yeah, I quite like that. I like writing that kind of exchange, that kind of dialogue.
Where is she going to go next? So she's just been to Masham.
Masham, yeah. I do have an idea of where she might go next. I won't say yet in case it changes. Yeah, I won't say yet.
Are you tempted to ever take her outside of Yorkshire?
Well, she has been to London. I have. It has crossed my mind, and it has been suggested. I just feel she belongs here. I feel she belongs here, and I think because Yorkshire has such variety, I think there's so much more left for her to explore, and so many places that she can go. I could take her somewhere entirely different, and that would mean I would have to go somewhere entirely different. And at present, that's not going to happen, is it?
No, that's true. Would you take her into the East Riding of Yorkshire?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely into the East Riding. I would, and yeah, I would take her. I would take her to Barnsley or Sheffield. That's crossed my mind that she's North Riding, she's West Riding, and of course she has been across to Whitby. So yeah.
And this is my dad again. Hunslet and Holbeck could be good settings.
Well, they could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I did go to Hunslet, and I had a really good look round. And I did kind of look at the history of Hunslet and the history of Holbeck. And the trouble is, I hate to say this, it's not there anymore. It's gone, hasn't it? It's the streets that were there, the places that were there. There's no sign of what it would have been like in Kate's period, and so I think that was what stopped me. Setting something in Hunslet. Maybe that's my lack of imagination. I ought to try harder, but it did actually stop me when I was thinking about it.
Because there's little bits of the Hunslet Engine Company and things left.
Yeah. There's that train, isn't there, that people have done a lot of work on. Yeah, maybe I need to have another look at Hunslet sometime.
There's a few questions in here. Maureen wanted to know if there's any advice you'd give to your younger writing self that you.
Oh, yes. It's really hard when I look back. I started writing a novel at 18, and I got about 30 pages in and realised it was absolutely hopeless. And I don't know. I think you have to live a bit for a while, maybe, and of course reading lots of things and experiencing, and of course when I was younger, it's a bit different than it is now. I wasn't aware of any writing groups, and I knew nothing. I didn't know there were such things as agents, and I'm sure there weren't as many of them as there are now. But I think I would just say what I did do, which was just keep at it. I bought this typewriter when I was 18 to write this novel, and when it didn't go well, I just did something completely different. I picked up my typewriter, and when I was 19, I was just 19. I was a secretary, and secretaries were in demand in America, British secretaries. And I just went there, and I took my typewriter with me, and I wrote poems in the style of Dorothy Parker. And so I just say, just keep writing. It doesn't matter if it's rubbish. It doesn't matter if you're copying someone. Just do it, and just keep at it. And now, of course, there are all sorts of courses people can go on. and just don't be afraid.
One of our favourite questions to ask of all authors is, what's your most memorable moments as an author so far?
Oh, I think, again, I'm going back to my mother. It was my mother's 100th birthday, and the Yorkshire Evening Post came along, took a photograph of her with the manuscript of the novel. Was it? Oh yeah, with the manuscript, and by then I'd done. Oh no, it was a little bit after 100th birthday when I actually had the book printed. And we were in the Yorkshire Evening Post, and my niece, who was then very young, she would have been about 4 maybe, just thought that her family would always be in the Yorkshire Evening Post. So that was quite a memorable moment. And I suppose another one was when I brought out a book of peace stories for the Bradford Peace Museum, and various other groups that were involved, and we had a bit of a launch at the Bradford City Hall. And then when I worked with the Nottingham Youth Theatre, and we did a really big play, and it was on at Nottingham Playhouse. And then I suppose when I got the occasional award, something like that, or nominated for an award. So there are all sorts of moments. I'm not sure whether there is one big moment, except with my mother.
It's a really lovely story, though.
She did. She was a great influence. Yeah. And when I came back from America and I was writing a novel, and I was in the attic at my mother's house, I brought back money with me so I could not have to work for a year. Went up and typed this and wrote this novel. And she'd bring me a cup of tea and a biscuit. She was so encouraging. And that didn't get published, but nevertheless, you just have to, I think, just press on.
Would you write in other genres apart from, so you've written like family sagas and crime, would you write in any other genres?
I think I'm probably like a lot of writers. I think it's not the writers that put them. I mean, eventually you are in a genre and you know you're in a genre, but mostly I think it's about writing the story that grips you, and writing it as well as you possibly can. And sometimes my agent has to remind me that I'm writing crime. You have to have a body by page 100. So I don't know, I probably could, but I've now written crime for such a long time, 12 books. And before that, the historical novels, the sagas, they had crime in them. The third one, it had a murder, it had a bank robbery, and it had a miscarriage of justice. So I was obviously slowly moving into crime, and I don't think I could ever leave injustice behind. I think that will always be there as running underneath the stories.
So you undertake an awful lot of research about the areas and the time and all sorts of things that have happened, and we talked about that. Is there anything you've ever come across in that research that's really surprised you?
Surprised me. Yeah, there's such. Yeah, I suppose when I went to Bolton Abbey, I did some research there, and I looked into the background, and just, I mean, we all know about inequalities, but the kind of hereditary inequalities that we have experienced in this country. When you actually look at it and you look at the histories of families and how they come about money through propitious marriages, through convenient deaths, through all sorts of connections. I mean, I knew all of those things, but just to see it in action and to see how wealth is maintained over the centuries was quite an interesting thing.
The book set in Bolton Abbey is one of my favourites, and
Oh, the Maharaja, yeah,
it's
yes,
a little bit different, isn't it?
It was different, and I loved doing that because I loved bringing over the Maharaja and all his entourage, and it was the idea came from a friend who she was doing her family tree, and most of her family lived and died in Yorkshire, but there was one person, a third cousin twice removed, who married a Maharaja, danced at the Folly Bergère and married a Maharaja. And the person's name in real life was Stella Mudge. And that was quite fascinating. I mean, that was, again, something that was really interesting to find out about. And Stella Mudge, she was actually the granddaughter of Yorkshire farmers. I made her the daughter of Yorkshire farmers. And she did extremely well out of this Maharaja. They married, she had masses of jewels, she had a huge fortune. And after she died, it was all locked away in a Swiss bank. And she, because she wasn't there to tell anyone any of the pseudonyms that she'd used or to give them a code for the bank. So somewhere in a Swiss bank is Stella Mudge's fortune that she gained from the Maharaja.
Wow. This is what I love about your novels. There's so much, like, just with the sort of, even the recent one with the like industry queens, of things that you didn't know about in history that you bring to light in the books as well. And I think that's really, really.
Well, yeah, I always like something that interests me. I think if it interests me, I hope it will interest someone else. And it just gives that little extra something, I think, to the novel.
Yeah, apparently the oak trees are a different variety than the rest of the UK that grow in the grounds of Bolton Abbey.
Oh, are they? Oh, I didn't know that.
Let me just check. Yeah, that's my dad again.
Oh, it's your dad. Thank you, David.
With his accent out.
It's really intriguing, isn't it? Yeah. I wonder if there are any other places where you have special trees that grow different trees. I'll have to ask him sometime.
Yeah, maybe. He loves Yorkshire.
Mm.
He also says Haworth would be a great setting.
Oh, yeah, I've used Haworth. Yeah. Yeah, I've used Haworth in A Snapshot of Murder, because I chose the year when a well-wisher, a Yorkshire man who'd made good, bought the parsonage for the use of the Bronte Society, because previous to that, the museum had been in a room above the Yorkshire Penny Bank at the top of the main street. And so I chose the day when the keys were handed over, and Kate and her friends are there doing photography, and someone is murdered outside the parsonage on that important day.
Here's a good question from Maureen again. She said, would you set a Kate Shackleton book in a cinema, as there are quite a lot built around the 1930s, I believe?
Oh, yeah. That's an interesting question, because Kate's niece is an usherette in a cinema. So I had thought about cinemas, and I had thought about something bad happening in a cinema, but I hadn't thought about setting a story there. But it's a really good idea, because I was also an usherette in the cinema. So yeah, thank you for that idea, Maureen.
There are beautiful ones in Leeds as well, aren't there, that are like historic, and
it might do for a story. Yeah.
Yeah, like the Hyde. I'm trying to think. There's like the Hyde Park Cinema, there's Cottage Road as well, isn't it? They're all old and would be good for a story.
You're breaking up. You're breaking up a little bit.
Right.
Can you?
My dad says the old cinema in Headingley would be a good setting.
Oh, wouldn't it? Yes, it would, wouldn't it? Yeah.
That one's a Cottage Road one, I think, isn't it?
Cottage Road. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Yes, I had a look at those. I think about those. Yeah, I mean, it's great that they're still there, isn't it? It really is.
A lovely slice of history.
Mm.
Is there a favourite setting that you've had that you've used?
Well, I loved going to Whitby. That was really, really nice to go to Whitby, and also for the very first book, I went to Cottingley, and I called it Bridgestead in the story, but it was Cottingley. And originally, I had thought to include something about the Cottingley fairies, and I didn't. So, yeah, that was nice because I'd read about the Cottingley fairies and I was quite interested in the background and the stories. But in the end, it was just one of those things that it didn't come into the novel. I think most of the places are places that I like to go. So that's been quite good. And also, it was great to set something in the Leeds Library and go into the basement of the library and have a good look round there. And what gave me the idea for that was when I learned that the library was haunted. And if you know that a building is haunted or said to be haunted, it's very tempting to set a book there. It gives a kind of very nice starting point.
You've done quite a few author events at the Leeds Library as well, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I'm a member there, and I really enjoy going there. But of course, I haven't been there recently. Although they did have kind of quite good precautions on so that we could go in the library. And yeah, it's a really, really nice place to go, and they have all sorts of events on there.
It is. Oh, we've got a load of messages coming up. Edith Harrison says she's looking forward to reading your latest book.
Oh, good. Thank you, Edith.
We've only got a couple of minutes left. Do you just want to give us a little reminder about yourself and your novels?
Okay. I'm Frances Brody, and I write the Kate Shackleton murder mysteries, and there are 12 of them. And the neglected novels that I have written are my historical novels, which are Sisters on Bread Street, Sixpence in Her Shoe, and Halfpenny Dreams. And they're very, I know that people kind of put them in a little corner sometimes, sagas, and think they're for certain people, but I can promise you they're really, really good novels. Kate Shackleton is just a great character to write about.
She's a great character to read about as well. Thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight for this interview.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Caroline.